Good evening, dear friend. I am Brother Kai, and I'm grateful you've chosen to spend this quiet time with me tonight. Here in a monastery, the evening bell has just finished its gentle call, and the world around us is settling into that peaceful space between day and night. Tonight, I'd like to share with you some stories and reflections that have brought me comfort over the years. Stories born from simple moments, quiet observations, and the gentle wisdom that emerges when we allow ourselves to truly rest. Let yourself settle wherever you are. There's no need to change anything about your position or your breathing. Simply allow yourself to be here in this moment as we begin this gentle journey together. The patience seed. This morning, as I often do, I spent time in our monastery garden. There's something profoundly peaceful about working with the earth, about placing seeds in soil and trusting in the mysterious process of growth. I was planting winter radishes today, and as I held those tiny seeds in my palm, I found myself thinking about patience. In my former life in the city, I was always rushing toward the next thing, the next achievement, the next moment I thought would finally bring me peace. But seeds know something we often forget. They know that there's a time for resting in darkness, a time for sending down roots we cannot see, and a time for the slow emergence into light. I remember when I first came to the monastery, I was like a seed that had been scattered on hard ground. I wanted immediate transformation, instant enlightenment. Brother Thomas, our head gardener then, used to smile at my impatience. He'd show me the seedlings in the greenhouse, some barely visible green threads pushing through the soil. Brother Kai, he would say, "Do you think this tomato seedling is worried that it's not yet bearing fruit?" Of course not. The seedling simply grows, day by day, trusting in its own nature, trusting in the process. I've learned that we too are like seeds, dear friend. Whatever you're growing through right now, whether it's healing from old wounds, learning new ways of being, or simply trying to find more peace in your daily life, remember that growth happens mostly in the darkness, in the quiet spaces we cannot see. There's a radish seed I planted 3 weeks ago. For the first week, nothing was visible above ground. If I had been impatient, I might have dug it up to check on its progress. But I trusted. And now there's a small green leaf reaching toward the sun. Your own growth may not be visible to you right now. But trust, as the seed trusts. Rest in the darkness when you need to. Send down roots into what nourishes you. And know that in time, in the right time, you will emerge into your own light. Sometimes in the evening, I walk through the garden and whisper quiet encouragement to the plants. Not because they need it, but because it reminds me that we're all in this process of becoming together. Story 2. The Monastery Cat's Teaching. We have a cat here at the monastery. Her name is Luna, though she chose us rather than the other way around. She appeared one winter morning about 5 years ago, a small gray figure sitting by our kitchen door as if she'd always belonged there. Luna has become one of my greatest teachers, though I suspect she doesn't know it. Every morning, after our first meditation, I see Luna doing something remarkable. She finds a patch of sunlight, sometimes on the wooden floor of the chapel, sometimes on the stone steps outside, sometimes in the garden among the herbs. And she settles into it completely, not partially, not while worrying about where the sun will be in an hour. Completely. I watch her, and she's utterly present to the warmth on her fur, the way the light feels on her closed eyelids. When the sun moves, she doesn't resist or complain. She simply opens her eyes, looks around with that calm curiosity cats possess, and finds the next patch of light. In my former life, I spent so much energy trying to hold on to moments of happiness, trying to make them permanent. I would have a beautiful day and immediately start worrying about when it would end. I would experience a moment of peace and try to capture it, analyze it, make sure I could recreate it exactly. But Luna knows something about impermanence that took me years to learn. She enjoys the sunlight fully, knowing it will move. She doesn't waste the warmth worrying about the coming cold. Yesterday, I was sitting in the garden feeling troubled about a letter I'd received from my sister. Family relationships can be complicated, and I was turning the conversation over and over in my mind, trying to find the perfect response, the words that would heal old misunderstandings. Luna appeared and settled in the sun next to me. As I watched her, I realized I was doing what I used to do, trying to control outcomes, trying to make something permanent that was naturally flowing and changing. So I took a lesson from my teacher. I stopped analyzing and simply sat in the warmth of caring for my sister without needing to solve everything in that moment. I let myself feel the love without insisting it look a particular way. Sometimes the most profound wisdom comes not from ancient texts, but from watching a cat find sunlight. Tonight, as you settle into rest, perhaps you can be like Luna. Find your patch of warmth. Maybe it's the softness of your pillow, the weight of your blanket, the simple rhythm of your breathing. Settle into it completely, without trying to make it last forever, without worrying about tomorrow's challenges. Just this moment, just this breath, just this gentle settling into what is. The walking meditation. Every evening before our final prayer, I take a walking meditation around the monastery grounds. It's a simple path that circles our main buildings. Nothing elaborate, just worn dirt and stones where thousands of feet have walked before mine. Tonight, I like to take you with me on this walk, though you can experience it from wherever you're resting. We begin at the chapel door. The first few steps, I'm often still carrying the day with me, fragments of conversations, small worries, the mental list of tomorrow's tasks. But I've learned not to judge this. Thoughts are like clouds passing through the sky of the mind. I acknowledge them and let them drift. Step by step, I feel my feet connecting with the earth. There's something ancient and grounding about this simple contact, soul to soil, body to world. My breathing naturally begins to slow and deepen. We pass the vegetable garden where I spent this morning. In the growing darkness, I can just make out the shapes of tomato plants heavy with fruit and the neat rows of lettuce we'll harvest tomorrow. There's a profound peace in knowing that growth continues even when we're not watching, even while we sleep. The path turns now, and we walk alongside the old stone wall that's been here for over a century. I often wonder about all the monks who've walked this same path before me, carrying their own worries, their own hopes, their own search for peace. Sometimes I feel their presence, not in any mystical sense, but in the simple knowing that the human journey toward understanding has been walked by countless feet. We're not alone in our struggles or our seeking. There's a particular oak tree about halfway around the path that I always pause beside. It's ancient, gnarled, and in winter it looks almost skeletal against the sky. But come spring, it produces the most tender green leaves, and by summer it offers deep shade. This tree has become a teacher about resilience. It bends in storms but doesn't break. It loses its leaves but trusts in their return. It grows slowly, adding just one ring each year, patient with its own becoming. I often place my hand on its bark and feel the slow, steady presence of something that has weathered many seasons. In those moments, my own worries seem to find their proper proportion. What feels urgent and overwhelming in my human time frame becomes part of a larger rhythm. We continue walking, past the herb garden where lavender and rosemary release their fragrances into the evening air. The scents remind me that healing grows all around us, often in the simplest forms. As we complete the circle and return to the chapel door, I'm always changed, even if subtly. The walking hasn't solved any problems or answered any questions definitively, but it has reminded me that I am part of something larger than my individual concerns. The earth supports each step. The air fills my lungs without my having to think about it. The stars are beginning to appear overhead, following patterns older than human memory. You don't need a monastery path to experience this peace, dear friend. You can take this walking meditation anywhere, around your own block, through a park, even in your imagination as you lie in bed. Feel your connection to the earth that holds you. Notice your breath joining the rhythm of the world breathing. Let your steps, whether real or imagined, carry you into the gentle understanding that you belong here, in this moment, in this world. Reflection, the art of letting go. I'd like to share something I've been contemplating lately, the art of letting go. It's something I struggle with even after all these years of practice. Perhaps you can relate. This week, I received news that an old friend from my life before the monastery had passed away unexpectedly. Michael and I had worked together in the marketing firm where I spent my 20s. We'd shared countless coffee breaks, late nights working on projects, dreams about the futures we imagined for ourselves. After I left for the monastery, we gradually lost touch. You know how it is, life carries us in different directions, and what once seemed like permanent friendships begin to fade. I would think of him sometimes, always meaning to reach out, always assuming there would be more time. When Brother Francis handed me the letter with the news, I felt that familiar tightness in my chest. Regret. The weight of words unspoken, connections allowed to drift. For the first day, I carried this heaviness with me. I found myself replaying old conversations, wondering what I could have done differently, wishing I had been a better friend across the years. But then, during evening meditation, something shifted. I remembered something Michael used to say during those stressful late nights at work. When we'd hit a deadline that seemed impossible, when everything felt overwhelming, he would lean back in his chair and say, "Well, Kai, we can only do what we can do." Such simple words, but they held profound wisdom. We can only do what we can do. In this moment, with the knowledge and capacity we have right now, I realized I was trying to hold on to something that was meant to flow our friendship. Yes, but more than that. I was trying to hold on to a version of myself that no longer existed, trying to carry responsibility for choices made years ago with different understanding. So I began to practice letting go. Not letting go of Michael's memory or the love I had for our friendship, but letting go of the regret, the should-haves, the if-onlys that were keeping me from appreciating what we did share. I spent time remembering his laugh, this wonderful, infectious laugh that would fill the whole office. I remembered his kindness to the new employees, how he always made sure everyone felt included in our work conversations. Letting go, I've discovered, isn't about forgetting or not caring. It's about releasing our grip on how we think things should have been and opening our hands to hold what actually is. What actually is, I had a friend who brought joy and wisdom into my life. He's gone now, but the way he changed me, the laughter we shared, the lessons he taught me about approaching challenges with grace, these remain. Is there something you've been holding too tightly, dear friend? Perhaps an old hurt, a missed opportunity, a relationship that didn't unfold as you hoped? Tonight, in the safety of this quiet space, see if you can practice opening your hands. Not to push anything away, but to hold it all more gently. The meditation teacher Thich Nhat Hanh once said that we must learn to love with the hands open. I think this applies to everything in life, our memories, our hopes, our grief, our dreams. Michael would have laughed at the irony of him teaching me about letting go from beyond this world. Still learning from me, are you, Kai? I can almost hear him say. And I am. We keep learning from each other, even across the boundaries we think separate us. The night garden. There's something magical about the monastery garden at night. During the day, it's a place of work, weeding, watering, harvesting. But when darkness falls, it transforms into something else entirely. Tonight, let me take you into this nocturnal world. I often slip out after our last prayer, when the other brothers have retired to their cells. The garden in moonlight is like stepping into a different realm. The vegetables and herbs that look so ordinary in daylight seem to hold secrets in the silver darkness. The tomato plants cast intricate shadows, and the bean poles create geometric patterns against the star-filled sky. Everything is quieter, more mysterious, more alive in ways that daylight somehow obscures. There's a small bench near the center of the garden where I like to sit and simply be present to this nighttime world. The sounds are different here. The gentle rustle of leaves in the evening breeze, the distant call of an owl in the woods beyond our walls, the soft chirping of crickets hidden among the vegetables. I've noticed that plants seem to breathe differently at night. During the day, they're reaching toward the sun, actively growing, producing. But at night, they rest into themselves, gathering strength for tomorrow's growth. Sitting in this peaceful darkness, I often think about the hidden life happening all around me. Roots extending deeper into the soil, seeds germinating in the earth. The slow, patient work of transformation that happens when we're not watching. Last week, I discovered something wonderful. Our sunflowers, which face east toward the morning sun during the day, had turned back to face each other across the garden rows. In the darkness, they had formed their own community, their great round faces like a circle of friends sharing quiet conversation. This image stayed with me for days. During the daylight hours, we naturally turn toward our goals, our responsibilities, our daily purposes. But there's also value in those times when we turn toward each other, when we rest from the constant reaching and simply exist in community. I began to think about how often I forget to do this in my own life. Even here in a monastery, surrounded by brothers who share this contemplative path, I can get so focused on my individual practice, my personal spiritual development, that I forget the nourishment that comes from simply being present with others. The night garden has taught me about the importance of both movements, the reaching toward light and purpose, and the turning toward each other in rest and community. Perhaps you know this rhythm too. The times when you're actively growing, learning, striving, and the times when you need to turn away from all that effort and simply be held by the presence of others, or by the gentle darkness that allows things to restore themselves. I've started thinking of sleep itself as a kind of night garden, A time when our minds and bodies do their own hidden work of healing and integration. A time when we're not actively trying to grow or achieve, but simply trusting in the natural processes of restoration. From my bench in the garden, I can see the windows of the monastery where my brothers are settling into their own rest, each one carrying their own hopes and struggles, their own journey toward understanding. And I'm filled with gratitude for this community of seekers, these fellow travelers on the path. Sometimes I whisper a quiet blessing over the garden, for the plants, for my brothers, for all beings everywhere who are resting into the darkness with trust. May you rest well. May you grow in the darkness. May you turn toward the light when it's time, and toward each other when light is not what's needed. Tonight, dear friend, you are part of this night garden too. Rest into the darkness with trust. Know that hidden growth is happening, that restoration is taking place in ways you cannot see. And know that somewhere in monastery gardens and city parks, in bedrooms and hospital rooms, in places of joy and places of struggle, others are resting too. We are all part of this great night garden of human becoming. The bread baker's wisdom. Every morning at 4 o'clock, Brother Marcus begins baking the bread that will nourish our community for the day. I'm usually awake at that hour for morning meditation, and I've come to love the gentle sounds that drift from the kitchen, the soft kneading, the quiet opening and closing of the oven door, the peaceful rhythm of someone doing work they love. Brother Marcus has been our baker for 23 years. He came to us as a young man, carrying his own share of troubles, his own questions about life's meaning. But he found something in the daily practice of bread making that transformed both him and all of us who share his loaves. A few weeks ago, I asked if I could learn from him. Not just the technical aspects of baking, but the spiritual practice he's cultivated through all these years of working with flour and water, yeast and time. Bread teaches patience, he told me as we began mixing the first batch. You cannot hurry the rising. You cannot force the transformation. You can only create the right conditions and trust the process. As I watched him work, I was struck by the meditation in his movements. The way he handled the dough firmly but gently, working with its nature rather than against it. When the dough was sticky, he didn't fight it. When it needed more flour, he added it gradually, feeling his way toward what was needed. In my early years here, he shared, I would get frustrated when the bread didn't turn out as I expected. Too dense, not risen enough, slightly burned. I took it personally, as if the bread's imperfections reflected my own failures. But bread taught me about forgiveness, both of the bread and of myself. Even imperfect loaves nourish hungry people. Even failed batches teach us something for next time. We worked in comfortable silence for a while, shaping loaves with our hands. There's something profoundly satisfying about this work, taking simple ingredients and participating in the ancient alchemy that transforms them into sustenance. Brother Kai, Marcus said as we waited for the loaves to rise, do you know what I love most about baking bread? I shook my head, curious. It's that every day, I get to participate in one of humanity's oldest acts of faith. When I mix the yeast into warm water, when I fold it into the flour, I'm trusting in something I cannot see. I'm believing that transformation will happen, that what looks like simple ingredients will become something that sustains life. His words stayed with me long after that morning. How much of life requires this same act of faith? We plant seeds without knowing if they'll grow. We love people without guarantees. We hope for healing without certainty. We practice kindness without knowing if it makes a difference. And yet we keep mixing the ingredients, trusting in the mysterious processes that transform simple elements into something nourishing. This week, I've been thinking about what ingredients I'm mixing in my own life. What am I adding to the dough of my daily existence? Patience or impatience? Kindness or judgment? Trust or fear? Brother Marcus has taught me that we are all bakers, in a sense. Every day, we're combining the elements of our experience, trusting that somehow they will transform into something that nourishes not just ourselves but others too. Sometimes the bread doesn't turn out as we expected. Sometimes our days feel dense or undercooked or slightly burned around the edges. But even imperfect loaves can feed hungry hearts. Even our struggling days can offer something valuable to the world. As you settle into sleep tonight, perhaps you can think of rest as part of the rising process. The quiet time when transformation happens without our effort, when the ingredients of the day settle and integrate, preparing for tomorrow's nourishment. Trust the rising, dear friend. Trust the mysterious process that takes the simple elements of your life and transforms them into something that sustains not just you, but all those whose lives you touch. In the darkness, the dough rises. In the silence, wisdom ferments. In the rest, tomorrow's bread is being prepared. Sleep well, knowing you are both the baker and the bread, both the one who tends and the one who is being transformed. The river's teaching. There's a small river that runs along the eastern boundary of our monastery grounds. It's not particularly grand, barely wide enough to require a simple wooden bridge to cross, but it has become one of my most cherished teachers. I discovered its wisdom quite by accident. Several months ago, I was struggling with a decision about whether to accept additional responsibilities in our community. Brother Abbot had asked me to consider becoming the monastery's correspondence secretary, handling letters from visitors and those seeking spiritual guidance. Part of me felt honored by the trust, but another part felt overwhelmed. I was comfortable with my simple routine of garden work and private contemplation. Taking on new duties felt like stepping into uncertain waters. I found myself walking to the river that evening, carrying this inner turmoil like a heavy stone. I sat on the bank and watched the water moving past, not rushing, not stagnant, but flowing with a kind of purposeful ease. As I watched, I noticed something remarkable. When the water encountered rocks in its path, it didn't fight them or try to move them. It simply found a way around, sometimes even seeming to embrace the obstacles, swirling gently around them before continuing on its way. Fallen branches that had once blocked the flow were now incorporated into the river's dance. What had seemed like impediments had become part of the water's graceful choreography. I began to understand that the river wasn't trying to be anything other than what it was. It wasn't comparing itself to other rivers, wasn't worried about whether it was flowing fast enough or in the right direction. It simply trusted its own nature and moved according to the landscape it encountered. What if I found myself thinking, I could approach this decision like the river approaches obstacles, not by forcing my way through or avoiding the challenge, but by finding my natural response to what life is presenting. I sat by that water for over an hour, letting my mind settle into the rhythm of its flow. Gradually, my anxiety about the new role began to transform into curiosity. What would it be like to serve in this way? How might it change me? What might I learn about myself and others? The river taught me that we don't have to have all the answers before we begin moving. We simply need to trust our nature and respond authentically to what appears in our path. I accepted the position the next day, and it has indeed changed me. Some days the work flows easily, like water over smooth stones. Other days I encounter obstacles, difficult letters, complex human pain that I don't know how to address. But I've learned to move around these challenges rather than fighting them, to let them teach me rather than blocking my flow. The river continues to be my teacher. When I feel stuck in rigid thinking, I walk to its banks and remember the lesson of fluid response. When I'm trying too hard to control outcomes, I watch the water trust its own movement toward the sea. There's a particular spot where the river curves around a large boulder. For years, the water has been gently wearing away at the stone's edges, not through force but through patient, persistent contact. The boulder is slowly changing shape, becoming smoother, more integrated into the river's flow. This image has become a meditation for me on how we change each other through relationship, not by trying to force transformation, but through patient, loving presence, through showing up consistently with gentleness, trusting that love has its own power to soften even the hardest places. Sometimes visitors to the monastery ask me about finding their life's purpose, about knowing if they're on the right path. I often bring them to the river and ask them to simply watch for a while. Notice, I tell them, that the river never seems confused about where it's going. It doesn't question whether it should be flowing toward the sea. It simply flows, responding to the terrain, trusting the pull of something larger than itself. We each have our own current, our own natural direction of flow. Sometimes we lose touch with it in the noise of expectations and shoulds and what we think our lives are supposed to look like. But it's always there, this inner knowing, this natural movement toward what serves not just ourselves, but the larger world. The river flows because that's what rivers do. You are here because that's what you do. You bring your unique gifts, your particular way of being, your irreplaceable contribution to the great flowing of existence. Tonight, as you settle into rest, perhaps you can imagine yourself as part of this great river of being. Let yourself feel held by the current that knows where it's going, even when you don't. Trust the flow, dear friend. Trust your own nature to find its way. The bell ringer's wisdom. For 37 years, Brother Joseph has been our bell ringer. Every morning at 5, every evening at 7, and at various times throughout the day, his steady hand pulls the rope that calls us to prayer, to meals, to the rhythms that structure our contemplative life. Brother Joseph is nearly 80 now, and his movements have slowed, but his dedication to this simple service has never wavered. Recently, I asked him what he had learned from all these years of calling the community together through sound. Brother Kai," he said with that gentle smile that seems to light up his weathered face. "The bell has taught me about presence in ways I never expected." We were standing in a small bell tower, and he gestured toward the bronze bell that has marked our days for over a century. When I first took on this responsibility, I thought it was just about keeping time, making sure everyone knew when to gather. But the bell taught me something deeper. He reached out and touched the bell's surface with reverence. You see, a bell can only ring truly when it's struck with full attention. If you're thinking about other things, if you're rushing or distracted, the sound lacks something. It's still a bell, still makes noise, but it doesn't sing. I listened, intrigued by this insight I never considered. In my early years here, Brother Joseph continued, I would often ring the bell while my mind was elsewhere, planning the day ahead, worrying about a sick brother, thinking about letters from home. The bell rang. People came to prayer. The routine continued. But I was missing something essential. He moved to the rope, worn smooth by decades of faithful hands. One morning, I was particularly distracted. My sister had written about our mother's declining health, and my mind was full of worry and regret about being so far from family. I pulled the rope mechanically, without presence, but something about the sound that morning stopped me. It seemed hollow somehow, functional but not beautiful. And I realized that the bell was reflecting my own state of mind back to me. Brother Joseph paused, his eyes taking on that distant look of someone accessing deep memory. That's when I began to understand that every moment of service, no matter how simple or routine, is an opportunity for prayer. Not just the formal prayers we say in chapel, but the prayer of complete presence to what we're doing. From that day forward, I made ringing the bell a meditation. Before I touch the rope, I take a breath and bring my full attention to this moment, this service, this community I'm calling together. I think of each brother by name, holding them in loving awareness as the sound carries across our grounds. I found myself deeply moved by this revelation. How many times had I heard that bell and taken it for granted? How many calls to prayer had I answered without really considering the loving attention that created the sound? Brother Joseph, I asked, what happens when you ring with such presence? The bell sings, he said simply. Not just rings, but sings. There's a quality to the sound that comes only when ringer and bell are fully united in purpose. And I've noticed that when the bell sings this way, people respond differently. They don't just hear the call, they feel it. They're drawn not just by habit, but by something deeper. He gestured toward the windows that looked out over our community. I've watched brothers stop whatever they're doing when the bell sings with presence. I've seen them pause, smile, take a deep breath before heading to prayer. The sound seems to remind them not just that it's time to gather, but why we gather. You see, Brother Kai, we think that our spiritual practice is separate from our daily tasks. We pray in chapel, then we do work. We meditate in our cells, then we serve meals. But the bell taught me that every action can be prayer when it's done with complete presence. I thought about my own work in the garden. How different it felt when I approached it as meditation versus when I was simply trying to get tasks completed. How do you maintain this presence, especially after so many years? Brother Joseph chuckled softly. Some days are better than others, I'll admit, but I've learned that presence is like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it becomes. And the bell is a patient teacher. When my attention wanders, the sound itself reminds me to come back. There's something else, he added, his voice taking on an even more thoughtful tone. Over the years, I've come to understand that when I ring the bell with presence, I'm not just calling the community to prayer. I'm participating in something much larger. What do you mean? Think about it. Church bells have been ringing for centuries, calling people to remember what matters most. When I pull this rope with full attention, I'm joining my voice to that ancient chorus. I'm part of a great chain of souls who have dedicated their lives to reminding the world that there is something sacred in our midst. The depth of this perspective took my breath away. This simple daily task, performed with love and attention, connected Brother Joseph not just to our small community, but to the entire history of contemplative practice. Tonight, Brother Joseph said as we prepared to leave the tower, "When you hear the evening bell, listen not just with your ears, but with your heart. See if you can feel the love that sends the sound across the darkness, calling us home to what matters most." As we walked down the narrow stairs, I found myself thinking about all the simple tasks in my own life that I perform without presence. Washing dishes, sweeping floors, writing letters. What would change if I approached each one as Brother Joseph approaches the bell, as an opportunity for complete presence, for prayer, for connection to something larger than myself? That evening, when the bell called us to prayer, I listened differently. I heard not just the bronze and rope, but the loving attention that made it sing. I felt called not just to chapel, but to presence itself. And I understood that this is how transformation happens, not through grand gestures or dramatic revelations, but through bringing complete attention to whatever is right in front of us. Through letting even the simplest tasks become doorways to the sacred. Story 8. The Visitor's Gift. Last month, we received an unexpected visitor at the monastery. She appeared at our gates one rainy afternoon, a young woman in her 20s carrying a large backpack and wearing the kind of exhaustion that goes deeper than physical tiredness. Her name was Sarah, and she had been hiking alone for 3 weeks, following a trail that passed near our grounds. She asked if she might shelter from the storm and perhaps stay the night in our guest house. Brother Abbot welcomed her warmly, as we always do with travelers seeking refuge. But it quickly became clear that Sarah was carrying more than just hiking gear. She was carrying a profound grief that seemed to weigh her down with every step. Over dinner, she shared her story. 6 months earlier, her younger brother had died in a car accident. He was only 19, just starting college, full of dreams and possibility. Sarah blamed herself. They had argued the week before his death over something trivial, and they hadn't yet reconciled when the accident happened. "I keep thinking about our last conversation," she told us, tears flowing freely. "We fought about him borrowing my car without asking. Such a stupid thing. And now those angry words are the last we exchanged." She had quit her job, left her apartment, and started hiking, hoping that physical movement might somehow outrun the pain. But 3 weeks on the trail had taught her that grief travels with us wherever we go. I found myself deeply moved by her story, remembering my own struggles with regret and the weight of words unspoken. After dinner, I asked if she would like to walk with me in the garden, despite the continuing rain. We walked slowly between the rows of vegetables, our feet squelching in the muddy paths. The rain fell gently on the leaves around us, creating a soft percussion that seemed to invite quiet reflection. "Sarah," I said finally, "may I share something I've learned about carrying difficult memories?" She nodded, pulling her rain jacket closer around her shoulders. "A few years ago, I had an experience that taught me something important about the last words we exchange with those we love. I was visiting my elderly uncle in the hospital, my father's brother, a man who had been like a second father to me growing up. We paused beside the tomato plants, heavy with late summer fruit. Uncle Robert was dying, though none of us wanted to admit it yet. I had planned to stay longer, to have all those meaningful conversations you imagine having at such times. But I received word that I was needed back at the monastery urgently. One of our brothers had fallen ill. The rain continued its gentle rhythm as I remembered that difficult day. I felt torn between duties, between loves. Uncle Robert insisted I go, said the monastery needed me more than he did. So I left, giving him a quick hug and saying I'd see him soon. He died that night while I was traveling back here. Those casual words, "see you soon," became our final exchange. For months, I carried regret about not staying, not saying something more meaningful, more final. Sarah was listening intently, and I could see recognition in her eyes. "What changed?" she asked softly. "Brother Marcus, our baker, helped me understand something. He told me that love isn't contained only in our final words, but in the entire relationship we've built over time. The last conversation is just one note in a much longer song. We began walking again, our steps slow and contemplative. I realized I was giving too much power to one moment of imperfection and not enough credit to years of love shared. Uncle Robert knew I loved him, not because of what I said that last day, but because of how I had shown up in his life consistently over the years. But Sarah, I continued, your situation has taught me something even deeper. You fought with your brother because you cared about him. You were angry because he mattered to you. Even your argument was an expression of your relationship, your investment in each other's lives. She stopped walking and looked at me with surprise. I never thought of it that way. People who don't matter to us don't have the power to make us angry. Your fight with your brother wasn't the opposite of love. It was love in a complicated moment. It was two people who cared about each other struggling to figure out boundaries and respect. The rain began to lighten, and we could hear the evening birds starting to sing from their sheltered places. Your brother knew you loved him, Sarah. He knew it in the thousand small ways you showed care throughout his life. One argument doesn't erase a lifetime of sibling love. We stood together in the garden, letting this truth settle between us. But more than that, I added gently, if your brother could speak to you now, what do you think he would want you to know? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, tears mixing with raindrops on her face. He would want me to stop punishing myself, she said finally. He would probably tease me about being so dramatic, hiking across the country, carrying guilt he wouldn't want me to carry. Yes, I said softly. And he would want you to live fully, to honor his memory not through endless regret, but through embracing the life you still have to live. That evening, Sarah joined us for our night prayer. Afterward, she asked if she could stay an extra day. She spent the morning sitting by our small cemetery, where generations of brothers rest beneath simple stone markers. When it was time for her to continue her journey, she seemed different, lighter somehow, though still carrying natural grief for her loss. "Thank you," she said as she shouldered her pack. "I think I can stop running now." "Where will you go?" I asked. "Home," she said with a small smile. "I think it's time to go home and start living again." My brother would want that. After she left, I found myself reflecting on the gift she had brought us. In sharing her pain so openly, in letting us witness her struggle with regret, she had reminded all of us about the preciousness of our relationships and the futility of perfectionism in love. We love imperfectly because we are imperfect beings. But imperfect love is still love. Arguments and reconciliations, misunderstandings and forgiveness, these are all part of the complicated dance of caring about each other. That night at prayer, I found myself thinking of all the people in my life I had loved imperfectly. Instead of focusing on my failures and regrets, I tried to hold the whole picture, the kindnesses shared, the laughter, the ways we had supported each other through difficulty. Sarah's visit reminded me that every interaction with those we love is precious, not because it might be the last, but because it is part of the ongoing conversation of relationship. Even our difficult moments are threads in the tapestry of love we weave together. Tonight, dear friend, if you're carrying regret about words spoken or unspoken, remember that love is much larger than any single conversation. It lives in the entire story you shared with those who matter to you. It survives imperfect moments and finds expression in countless small ways we often take for granted. Your love is bigger than your regrets. Trust that those who have known you well understand the fullness of your caring, even when individual moments fall short of what we wish they had been. The seasons of the heart. I have lived through 17 winters here at the monastery, and each one has taught me something different about the seasons of the human heart. This morning, as I write these words, the first snow of this year is falling outside my window, covering the garden where I have spent so many hours learning from the earth's patient wisdom. There is something profound about experiencing the same cycle of seasons year after year in one place. It strips away the illusion that change is always progress, that movement is always improvement. Instead, it teaches us about the deeper rhythms of growth and rest, of flowering and dormancy, of letting go and beginning again. When I first arrived at the monastery, I was like someone trapped in perpetual spring, always pushing for new growth, new insights, new spiritual experiences. I wanted constant blossoming, continuous progress along some imagined path toward enlightenment. But the garden taught me that even the most vigorous plants need winter. They need the time of drawing inward, of resting in apparent emptiness, of letting old growth die back so that new life can emerge when the time is right. My first winter here was difficult. The days seemed endlessly gray, the ground frozen and seemingly lifeless. I felt as though my spiritual practice had stalled, as if the sense of growth and discovery I had experienced in my first months had simply stopped. Brother Thomas, the head gardener then, found me one January morning standing forlornly in the snow-covered vegetable plots. "Looks dead, doesn't it?" he said, gesturing toward the brown remnants of last year's plants. I nodded, feeling that the external landscape matched my internal one perfectly. "Look closer," he said, kneeling down and brushing snow away from the base of what had been a thriving herb plant. "See these small green shoots? Even in the depths of winter, life is preparing for spring. The plant hasn't stopped growing, it's just growing in a different way." He stood up, his knees creaking slightly, and looked at me with a kind of gentle understanding that comes from years of patient observation. "The heart has seasons too, Brother Kai. Sometimes we're in spring, full of enthusiasm and new growth. Sometimes we're in summer, productive and abundant. Sometimes we're in autumn, harvesting the wisdom of our experiences. And sometimes," he continued, "we're in winter. Everything seems quiet, dormant, even dead. But winter isn't failure, it's preparation. It's the season when roots grow deeper, when the essential nature of things becomes clear without all the decorative leaves and flowers. Over the years, I have come to recognize these seasons in my own spiritual and emotional life. There have been springs of sudden insight and renewed dedication, summers of fruitful service and deep connection with my brothers, autumns of reflection and integration when I could see clearly how experiences had changed me. And yes, there have been winters, periods when prayer felt dry and mechanical, times when the joy seemed to drain out of simple tasks, seasons when I questioned everything about my path, when the monastery felt less like a refuge and more like a prison. But the garden taught me to trust these fallow periods, to see them not as spiritual failure, but as necessary parts of the cycle. In winter, trees look bare and lifeless, but if you cut into a branch, you'll find it's very much alive, just conserving energy for the explosion of growth that spring will bring. I remember one particularly difficult winter, about 7 years ago. I was struggling with doubt about my vocation, wondering if I had made a mistake in leaving the world for monastic life. The silence that usually brought me peace felt oppressive. The routine that normally grounded me felt like meaningless repetition. I was tempted to leave, to return to the complexities and distractions of secular life. But something made me stay, perhaps just the stubbornness that had gotten me through other difficult periods, or maybe a deeper wisdom I wasn't yet conscious of. One morning in March, I was walking through the garden when I noticed the first crocuses pushing through the last patches of snow. Such small flowers, seemingly fragile, yet they had somehow found the strength to emerge from the frozen ground. Standing there looking at those tiny purple blooms, I suddenly understood what Brother Thomas had been trying to teach me years earlier. The winter I had just endured hadn't been a departure from my spiritual path. It had been the path. The questioning, the emptiness, the struggle with doubt, these had been doing their own kind of work, clearing away assumptions and attachments I hadn't even known I was carrying. I felt different that spring, and the differences lasted. More rooted somehow, less dependent on emotional highs or spiritual experiences to confirm that I was on the right track. The winter had taught me that faith isn't a feeling, it's a commitment that persists through all seasons. Now, when I encounter visitors going through their own winter seasons, whether spiritual, emotional, or circumstantial, I try to offer them the same gentle reassurance Brother Thomas gave me. This too is part of the path, I tell them. The difficulty you're experiencing isn't evidence that you're doing something wrong. It's evidence that you're alive, that you're growing, that you're human. Sometimes people are disappointed by this response. They want techniques for getting through winter faster, strategies for forcing spring to come early. But the garden has taught me that there are no shortcuts through the seasons. We can only live through them with as much grace as we can manage, trusting that each season has its own gifts and purposes. Winter teaches endurance and faith. Spring teaches hope and renewal. Summer teaches abundance and generosity. Autumn teaches gratitude and letting go. Right now, as I watch the snow falling outside my window, I feel a deep appreciation for the season of rest. The garden sleeps beneath its white blanket, gathering strength for next year's growth. And somewhere deep in my own being, I sense the same quiet preparation happening. What season is your heart in right now, dear friend? If you're in spring, celebrate the new growth and possibility. If you're in summer, enjoy the abundance and share your gifts generously. If you're in autumn, take time to appreciate what you've learned and grown. And if you're in winter, if things feel quiet or difficult or seemingly barren, know that this too is sacred time. Rest when you need to rest. Let old things fall away. Trust that beneath the apparent emptiness, life is preparing for its next expression. The seasons turn, always and reliably. Winter always gives way to spring, just as spring gives way to summer, summer to autumn, autumn to winter. This is the promise that holds us through the difficult times and keeps us humble in the abundant ones. You are part of this great turning, this eternal cycle of rest and growth, of letting go and beginning again. Trust the season you're in, even when, especially when, it's not the season you would choose. The earth knows what it's doing. And so, at the deepest level, do you? Closing blessing. Dear friend, as our time together draws to a close, I want to leave you with a simple blessing, one that I whisper to myself each night before sleep. May you rest in the knowledge that you are exactly where you need to be in this moment. May the seeds of wisdom you've planted today grow quietly in the soil of your dreams. May you wake tomorrow with a gentle understanding that each day offers new opportunities for growth, for kindness, for peace. The monastery bell is preparing to chime the hour of great silence, when even our whispered prayers give way to the deeper communion of rest. Until we meet again in the quiet spaces where wisdom dwells, sleep well. You are held by the same love that holds the stars in their courses and the seeds in their patient darkness. Good night, dear friend. Good night.